Universalism. I think Unitarian Universalism is a really liberal, left of the left. Most of our folks don't even believe in any deity, let alone one that says we don't believe in heaven or hell. So just to clarify. So I'm a religious educator in that what I do is invite people to have conversations they wouldn't have anywhere else. Whether it's about, and it has included about race, about sexuality, things in life that, the human condition. We are human, we are messy, and we are trying. And in 2022, I would think that we'd be further along than we are. Like, how do we keep screwing this up? But I digress. Okay. Thank you, Ahi, for the invitation. Thank you for that. Really fabulous. I have to lean because something happened to my back going back to yoga, so I'm fine. I'm just kind of wanting to not make it worse, so hence my leaning. I want to start this morning with kind of a little bit of a meditation. So I'm going to invite you, and however this works for you or not, you are welcome to listen to what I'm saying or not, and just kind of settle into your body. So I invite you to settle into your body, lower your gaze, or close your eyes if you are comfortable. Pay attention to your breath. No need to make it different. Just notice it. Notice your body and maybe any tension or pains that may be there, or maybe you're relaxed and not feeling any tension in your body, and you are settled right where you are. This morning, you've been participating in a program about safety. The word and concept is not neutral, nor does it apply to everyone equally. Notice how your body has responded to what you have heard already today. I will be presenting on what to do if you witness harassment. This may bring up different feelings in your body, those related to how you experienced or witnessed conflict in your childhood. We carry with us what we have been conditioned into. As you continue to notice your breath and pay attention to your body, I invite you to think about what messages you received as a child about conflict. What norms were you conditioned into? What happens to your body as you remember? If tension has shown up in your body as these thoughts arrive, I invite you to breathe, to remember your breath, and know that you are here. You are here in a group. You are safe. You will use the feelings that have come up as information. Feelings cannot hurt you. They are information. And you will take care of yourself in the best way you know how. At this moment, there is no conflict. And we have some measure of safety. We are in a building. We are together, sharing a common goal of learning and understanding. At this moment, we are here to build skills that will guide us and aid us in supporting this community. I invite you to notice your breaths, notice your body, and at your own pace, and when you are ready, raise your gaze and open your eyes. So I've been doing this workshop since the election before last when the hate pumpkin was elected, because Seattle started seeing overtly swastikas, harassment everywhere. So I was asked actually I used to work for the Bellevue Unitarian Church, and someone there said, please do a workshop because no one knows what to do in Seattle. And I said, well, I was raised in Jersey. I'm also born in Egypt. I am East Coast sensibility. When we see somebody being harassed, for the most part, we will respond. So part of what I realized in Seattle is the conflict avoidant, passive-aggressive nature of most folks, hashtag not everybody, I get it, but for the most part, this is an extremely conflict-avoidant culture. To the point where it took me like a year to figure out why I was making people cry that I work with at the Unitarian Church. And it was because I was just giving my opinion, and even if I disagreed, it was problematic. And part of why I started with a meditation on conflict is because when you're witnessing harassment, you're witnessing a conflict. And unless we examine what our messages have been about conflict, it's going to be harder for you to respond in a way that, I don't know that we could try to de-escalate, because I don't want to give I don't give myself a false sense of control that I truly can de-escalate something. I don't want to make it worse. Like, my thing is, I just don't want to make it worse, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about conflict, because it's important that you just know. You don't have to have everything figured out by 2 o'clock this afternoon. That's not going to happen, right? However, if you understand for yourself that when you hear voices raised, you immediately, and sometimes you're not doing it consciously 90% of the time, that you're going to go back to if you had a figure in your life who yelled, maybe, or who belittled someone else, and suddenly you may tense up and freeze and be afraid. Does that resonate with anyone? Yeah. So just knowing that, it will help you kind of say to yourself, okay, I know this is what comes up for me. I know that this is something that kind of gets me to freeze, or, fear. It may bring up fear in you, right? Completely understandable. So one of the things we're going to do today, along with the practical, like your handouts, kind of practically what to do some tools, what to do when you see somebody be harassed, is I'm going to invite you to think for yourselves about ways you can examine how you deal with conflict. And I'm going to invite you, I do a whole nother workshop on how to have difficult conversations, which also came out of living in Seattle, because people would hire me and be like, talk about race. I'm like, y'all don't have regular difficult conversations. How are you going to go to the harder? Wash the car. And Danny's like, what the heck? So he tells them, how to do it. You have to do wax on with your right hand, wax off with your left hand, paint up and down. And it all leads to muscle memory, because then when he starts the karate, right? So what I'm getting to here is when you understand how your reactions to conflict are, and you start engaging in how to have difficult conversation for yourselves, you're starting to do the uncomfortable things, say the uncomfortable things, move into courageous space. It wasn't landing as well as I was hoping, and it's because I didn't talk enough about conflict. And then I realized, yeah, the easy part is just teaching, here are some things you could do, because you can get them all off the internet, right? But I think the deeper thing is the invitation to know yourself so that you can prepare yourself. And there's always opportunities to have difficult conversations in life. Yay. Yeah. And I had a friend once say to me something about me liking conflict. I said, I actually hate conflict, but I'm just not afraid of it. So there's a big difference. Like, I do not like causing drama. In fact, I stay far away from it as much as I can. But what I won't do is shy away from something that can turn into a conflict, because I will have that difficult conversation. I don't have it perfectly. Cannot lay claim to that. So before I move on, does anybody I'm going to give Ahi the microphone. In case anybody has questions, please feel free to ask as I'm talking. at the end, of course, we'll have, but how is everything that I'm saying landing? What questions do you have? Is there a question that some of you have come here hoping I would address? Where are you right now? If anybody just wants to, I'm taking a temperature check, so to speak. Anybody want to? And Ahi, you could feel free to give your opinion. I'd love to know.
How am I feeling right now?
Yeah.
I'm like a very tool-based person, so I'm like, what's the meat? And then feeling people are like, pay attention to your body. I'm like, oh yeah, I should do that. So that's a good reminder for me. That's a good invitation to participate in this conversation for me to be fully present. So thank you for that part.
Excellent. Anyone else? Okay. Yeah. Yes, thank you.
I guess I'm just going to speak generally, but some of the people that I work with, I wish were here, and I can't control other people. And so understanding how I can bring this to them and share it generously, and then sit back and hope that they pick up the tools themselves. I guess that's something that I want to be able to share more broadly with my team, and they're not here, so.
So can I ask real quick, are you speaking to the part I just did, and also, yeah, okay, yeah. So I'm going to guess the having difficult conversations part. Yeah. Yeah. A, you could hire me, but B, this is not a pitch. I mean, it's a little. Here's the thing that I've learned, too, that people have reflected back to me over the years, and also I have learned from others. You're modeling all the time, especially if you're in a leadership role. So part of this is, yes, you can give the nuts and bolts. This is not a how to have difficult conversation workshop. This is literally like what to, and this stuff, none of this is original. It's all from the internet, and I think I have the attribution on your handouts where I got all this from. However, what I learned is when you model what it is you want others to do, they will more, I have found in general, if folks are open, sometimes they're not, which, yeah, I wish I had that fairy dust to control people, but we don't. You model it, and then also one of the things I've learned is modeling how to navigate making mistakes. Because that's a hard thing in white supremacy culture, is perfectionism, and people are afraid, A, to make mistakes, and then to name that they happened. So that's also part of leadership and having the difficult conversation, saying, hey, here's a thing that I did that wasn't helpful to the team, and here's how I would do it different. You're simply modeling, right? And that's the best you can do. And you could say, here are some resources, and here's some of the things I learned about how to have difficult conversation, knowing our relationship to conflict. I mean, does that land? Okay. Anything else that spark anything for anyone else they want to? Yeah, hello.
I was gonna add to that.
Yeah.
We're in the same.
Yeah.
So I would add to it, like I said earlier, there's no hacks to life. You have to literally navigate your life and try to literally do like a cheat sheet. So what you were saying earlier about modeling, but at the same time, because I had sociology and psychology together to do the practice that I do, is that you can create the space, but if the people are not ready and the people that are in those spaces do not have the capacity, it will fall on deaf ears. So it's up to you to figure out your department and your team, and also are you all compatible with each other energetically, and also when it comes to how you see the world. Sometimes we want to hire in people because of their alphabets before and behind their names, but at the same time, you have to look at the whole person. Looking at the whole person can help you decide if you need to do some more healing from your trauma so you can be a better leader, or you have to figure out if that team is right for you in that space. So that's what I'll add to it.
Thank you. Yes, excellent. The other thing I learned in a workshop I took with Erin is feelings and needs has been a superpower. So we were in a nonviolent communication workshop together. I'm not a huge, and I know Pam knows this already, I'm not a huge fan of nonviolent communication. However, there's, as is, because I think it could get, I've experienced it, sometimes folks can get cultish, not Erin, of course, but I'm teasing Erin, sorry. However, what the huge things I've learned from it that has been super helpful is empathy, self-empathy, building capacity empathy for others, and feelings and needs. And that has been super transformational for me in my work and how I approach it. So I'm just going to go real quickly what's a bystander. So what research has shown is when, now I'm going right into the nuts and bolts of harassment when you witness harassment, is that there's the person doing the harassing and the object or the victim of the harassment, right? Everyone else standing around is impacted by what's happening. No one who is a witness to harassment is not impacted by it in one way or another, whether or not people ever say a word. Research has shown that over and over. Obviously, the person most traumatized is the person being directly harassed. However, there's also impact on everyone around the person. So the 4 Ds, which I got online because I went back to this was put together a few years ago, and I actually find it pretty basic and kind of nuts and bolts and helpful. But hollaback.com, which is on the websites on here, have updated, now have a 5th D, and I didn't have time to watch all the workshops to find out what it was. So we have 4 Ds here, but apparently there's a 5th D, and I don't know what it is. So just in the interest of full disclosure. So these resources are helpful. The New York Times article, which was written in 2016, right after the election, I thought was also succinct and super helpful. And the first thing, so I'm going to do a scenario here now. I'm making the assumption that everyone here is working in a store type front, or maybe, so we'll use, if there's another example you want me to use, please feel free to raise your hand and we can use that one. But for now, we'll use let's say it's whatever store. Anyone want to name a store in Capitol Hill? Because all that's coming up for me is Babeland. So I'm like, well, I mean, I do teach sex ed, so that's why I go there for research. Listen. It is a store at Capitol Hill. So let's say, and you know what? It's not out of the realm of possibility. Like somebody, a Christo-fascist comes in and decides that they want to harass people who just want to shop at Babeland. So let's say somebody comes in and they just choose someone to start yelling at and being horrific and awful. So the first thing here is you don't have to confront the person, right? Even if here's the thing, and here's the sick reality of the United States right now is you never know who's not armed. Like, so I wanted to, when I was first approached by Pam, she said, she kept using the word de-escalation. I'm like, that is not the work I do. I don't know de-escalation because I think armed, I think, conflict that's way beyond somebody, not simply, but yelling something or using verbal harassment. So I want to be mindful that, because there was a training, one of these I did when 2 men were killed in Portland because they were trying to confront harasser. I think a woman had a hijab in the metro. So since then, I'm like, I really take seriously, if you feel that there is a threat, I know, Seattle police, rolling my eyes. Because it would make sense if you feel that someone is armed or there's a direct threat that you would call the police, right? So yes, that's an option. But so I guess what I'm trying to say is don't feel that you need to be a hero in a situation that may get more people hurt than not, right? So like I said, my goal whenever I'm in a situation that maybe, because I've had things directed at me when I do these workshops in spaces where, not everyone's signing up to be anti-racist and they're mandated to be there. Is just to not make it worse. Like my role is, how do I not make this worse? And not how do I let my own baggage escalate things, right? So you don't have to necessarily confront the harasser directly. And it could be that if, that you pay attention to the person who's the object of the harassment and remove them from the situation and ignore the harasser altogether, right? How does that land? Does that make sense to folks? That's an option, yeah. And there could, and here's the thing that's also true. If there's a situation where there is someone, in your staff or can be the person who can say to someone, hey, we need you to leave, then certainly call on that resource. If there is someone who has the capacity to do that, to say, hey, you're being out of line, please leave. So it's not out of the question, but it doesn't need to be your first instinct, especially if, I know, you're going to feel in your body anxiety, fight or flight, like, oh my gosh, this thing is happening, what do I do? Actually, I should have started this. Has anyone witnessed a harassment, like in your store? Has some version of this happened already? Do you want to talk about it? Thank you, God. Just so folks can hear you.
I spent years in retail and restaurants before I came to chamber work. And so 7 years at Starbucks and then 7 years for Taylor Shellfish, if you're familiar, in their restaurants in Seattle. So any number of situations. Folks that were patrons that were upset, folks that were harassing my bartenders, folks that, we were talking about getting to know your community. I had folks that lived outside some of my Starbucks stores that would help me put the outdoor furniture out every morning at 4 a.m. So lots of different scenarios.
Is anyone, go ahead, do you want to share?
So in the beginning of my journey of creating my firm, I used to work part-time at Macy's when it was downtown. And everyone knows, like, I used to, because I worked as a lens tech when I was in Bremerton, I transferred over to here because I was always downtown as Sunglass Hut. And so what I noticed was, because I was always feeling to know, it didn't matter if the person looked like they had money or didn't have money. I would literally greet them, make sure they felt safe in that space, and I'll always allow them to know that I was an individual working within that space. I would have small conversations with them. Not only that, but I had someone to actually, because it was always a space where they were always stealing. But when I was on watch, they never stole from me. And I had one guy to come up and he actually tried to steal. And I said, "Sir, I know that you're black and I'm black also." And I said, "This store don't care about me and they probably don't care about you." I said, "But when you're stealing from this space, it takes from my check because I have to figure out how am I going to do the actual, how do I, recoup the stolen items because it was on my watch." And I had to explain to him that. And once I broke it down to him in a level where he explained, and I didn't even say that he stole, but I just said, hey, when people steal, I created a space where I did not blame him, but I let him know the situation that goes on within that space. And he literally reached in his pocket. I'm not saying it's going to happen all the time. That's when it comes to discernment. And I told you about the inner work every day when you get up every morning or at night. So every time I actually went into that store, I knew that I had to put on my armor of understanding how I navigate the world and to be open enough to connect with someone on a human-centered level that they understand what I was going through. He literally reached in his pocket, he gave me back the glass, and he said, "I'm so sorry. I will steal next time for someone else, not you." But because I made it humanized, and I allowed him to understand what I was going through as a human being that looked like him, that it's tough for both of us. And even if you look differently from these individuals, you can still say, we're both here in a place I might not have your struggle, but we're still struggling in another way. So I guess it all comes back to community and also humanizing conversations in a way that you are not blaming the person, but having those conversations around what's happening, but at the same time, still calling it out.
That is a powerful story. Thank you. Thank you so much. Anyone else? It's hard for me to see because the light is right in my eye. So, okay. Thank you very much for that. And I also want to recognize that you're needing to do that more than any white person or anybody who doesn't have a target identity. So I recognize that. Thank you. So I'm going to do the very boring thing and just kind of refer to the handouts that I gave you. And because really what I hope to do is, or at least hear from you all, what comes up for you as your biggest fear when hearing all of this? What is it that you would find helpful to process? Because chances are very high that if you have that question or fear or anxiety, so do other people. So this is meant to be kind of an interactive. I'm not quite that entertaining that you need to just hear me talk for an hour. So I hope y'all, and we will have role plays, and it is completely voluntary. And if nobody wants to role play, we certainly can break out into small groups and you could have discussions amongst yourselves. I am not attached to things happening any certain way. This is meant to be where you all feel that your questions are being addressed and that, like I said, you could process what's coming up for you. So directly confronting someone can be risky because you can become a target too. So I'm reading right from here. In lieu of, thankfully, because I really don't love PowerPoints, but so thankfully it's not happening, we're doing it here. So one option is you could talk to the person being harassed, and you can, so one idea, and I've seen a lot of resources with this, is you can ask the person who's being harassed if they need help. You can also have a whole different conversation with them. Like, again, Babeland, hey, have you seen these new vibrators we got in? Like, whatever it is. I mean, you can just talk, kind of redirect the person and not necessarily even, again, because, again, go as the moment, what speaks to the moment. So, but know that you don't have to be like, hey, this guy's being an asshole, let's, ignore them, but you can just redirect the conversation completely. Which, not for nothing, is just Northwesterners excel at that anyway, so this should be easy for folks who grew up in town. Sorry. It's kind of true, though. Ask someone else for help. So this is where if you are on a team in a store and there's, other folks around you, you could alert them. That's probably a good idea anyway. Hey, this is happening in this part of the store if you're not noticing. Maybe you both can go over and redirect. Maybe one person can ask the harasser, hey, is there something you need? Is there, you can suggest new vibrators for that person. But, you can, the thing is here, again, you can be creative in terms of, and practice in your mind almost. You can even journal about it, like journal scenarios so that it's, because really what's going to happen if you haven't, or what I suspect is, it'll be fight or flight. And so you just want to have some measure of having navigated this in your minds, in your imagination a little bit. So it's not coming from nowhere. Okay, so if you can't intervene during the incident, you could still help afterwards. So if the person, says something awful and then leaves the store, you check in with the person who you suspect was the object of it, and make sure you check in and see how they're doing. So a friend of mine was in a Macy's a few years ago at Christmas, and Macy's at Christmas is ridiculously, this was before the times. I mean, now everybody's shopping online, which anyway. So there was a long line, and the the cashier, it was taking a long time because there was a lot of people. So this man just decided to be a complete terrible person about the situation and, yell racial epithets at this person. And he finally left. And my friend said, she had been coming to a bystander training, and she said, I didn't know what to do. I did nothing. But when he left, I walked up to the cashier and said, I'm really, really sorry that happened. And the cashier started crying because she was holding it in. She, what was she going to do? But she said, thank you for saying that she noticed that she was being harassed. She wasn't alone. So even though nothing was done to the harasser in that moment, the person who was the object of the harassment felt at least validated and seen by someone else, even after the fact. Does that make sense? Okay, so now we're going to go to the 4 Ds. And some of this we've already talked about in terms of just practical. Okay, actually, we're not going to do the 4 Ds. We're going to go into, it is, so there's an interesting thing happening in the last 5 years in this country. We've gone from, because I think for especially white liberals, the danger of what we're facing has become much, I think what the election of the hate pumpkin did, more for white liberals, I think, than white conservatives who want this to be a white supremacist nation, is woke white liberals up to the danger that black and brown people have been naming forever, that it's real. That we can no longer pretend this country's better than it is or ever has been since it's 1619. So some of this, I think, is changing in terms of I'm hoping that people are less and less willing to be bystanders. I mean, we're seeing more and more that people are trying to intervene, trying to help. So, having said that, here are some, on the third page, excuses people give or reasons for not intervening. So, it's not my problem, nobody else is doing anything, it's harmless, right? And I can't make a difference. So, if you're having because the other time you can model is when people talk about things happening and people not intervening and someone says it's not my problem. What's a response that you can give? We'll share the mic. What do you think? What would you say even in a conversation, maybe not with employees, but even just in your personal lives with people that you know and care about, and somebody's like, look, if I see something, I'm just going to make sure I take care of myself and it's not my problem. What are some things you think you would want to say?
Or in that. Oh, how would you feel if it was you? So just humanize it some. I don't know that that always works. I have an in-law family that doesn't want to hear it, but still.
What if it was you? Yeah, excellent. Thank you. What about if they say, well, nobody else is doing anything? What about if they say that? Go ahead. Nobody else is doing anything. Like, basically, why should I? Nobody else is.
Well, think about it, and I guess this is not me just acting out, but just creating a space of understanding. It might, if no one else is doing anything about it, you will have a turn next. Who will do something for you if you need help? So it's creating a space for them to understand it might not be your time now, but if you were in a situation, wouldn't you want someone to help you? And I'm riding a bus all the time, and I speak up all the time for people, and they're like, good on you. And they're like, you're just a good person. I was like, I'm not the only good person on this bus. I said, you have a voice too. So it's understanding how to like say, it might not have been my time, but next time it might be yours. And you would want someone to speak up for you.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing up transportation, because that also, when I've done this workshop all over the city, comes up over and over, is what happens on public transportation, which we alluded to what happened in Portland when 2 men died. And that's huge, is because also, I mean, there's layers and layers to what's happening in this society right now, and the breakdown, and people literally having nothing to lose. And there's a huge cost for that. So we're not going to solve that issue here and right now, but it's just something to keep in mind, that a lot of this is also happening because people are using what I also learned from our friend Pam Orbach, who's amazing. People use tragic strategies to fill unmet needs. And there's a lot of tragic strategies happening in this country for a lot of reasons that make sense and some that not necessarily. I'm going to ignore the it's harmless one because obviously it's not harmless. Okay, I do want to talk. Go ahead. Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to add to, my name is Laura. I just wanted to add to that piece as someone who rides the bus and is downtown often, and has worked security and just been in a lot of situations where in a group setting, the conflict is that nobody was doing anything because they assumed that somebody else was going to do something. And I struggle with that within myself too. Like, is this, me being this one person, is this going to be a threat to my bodily harm? Is this person going to have a knife or a gun? So I just wanted to call out that in those situations, I've definitely been there where I kind of looked around me on a bus or on the street to see how other people were interacting with the situation and if anyone else was going to do anything. And 9 times out of 10, nobody did anything. And even sometimes people would film it or call it out or laugh at it. And I've tweaked that within me because I generally expect that a lot of people aren't going to do anything. And it's hard to sit with that.
Thank you, Laura. And yeah, that's because here's the thing. Violence is real. In this country, like, we have a death culture. Like, when I hear, I so try hard to not get political, and it's impossible because I'm an immigrant. I'm not in a position of privilege to not be political, because that's a huge privilege when people are like, I don't do politics. Anyway, what I was getting at is that we have such a death culture, so when I hear pro-lifers want to just protect a clump of cells, I get upset, I get twitchy. Because we do live in a death culture, and everybody's armed. It feels like everybody's armed. And so that's a real thing. So I don't want to, I think we need to have compassion and empathy for ourselves, that when we're in situations where, because we do have to trust our intuition as well, because you just don't know, right? So to kind of what you're saying, the other thing that started happening when I do these workshops is people ask about when they see police stopping folks. I say, here's the thing, you're not going to win against the police. And they're going to do whatever the heck they want and not be charged. They can do whatever they want with impunity. That's a fact. This is documented. And so what I tell folks is film that. From very safe distance, I would not intervene. My ex-husband was federal law enforcement. There's nowhere to go with you running up to a cop and making an issue of whatever it is they're doing, right? The best we can do is bear witness. The only reason why there were uprisings as a result of what happened is because white America apparently keeps needing proof. Another workshop. Anyway, so I don't want to at all discount that really, really harsh reality of the dangers that exist. So this is all contextual, right? So again, if you're in wherever setting you're in Capitol Hill, and it's probably pretty clear that it's a obnoxious Proud Boy or whatever, a person comes in, Karen, there's white women, no shade to anybody named Karen in here. All my friends named Karen are just weeping. It's funny, but it's all, yeah. So anybody comes in, if you're kind of assessing the situation that this person is choosing to be obnoxious and is probably not armed, and it's probably, then yeah, you kind of do one of these tactics, and it'll probably be okay. But if there's a little something in you that's saying this may be way more dangerous than I think, listen to that. And then I would say, yes, tell someone else, make a phone call. I don't know what kind of inter-store community network y'all have. I would say, I've learned a lot from transformative justice and especially the LGBTQ community, where folks don't want to call, the immigrant community who don't want to call the cops, right? So what are some things strategies you all can do to call each other and say, hey, we need backup or something. It's funny, as I do this workshop, it gets harder and harder because it's just not linear, it's not binary, it's not, there is no easy answer, and everything's contextual. So.
Just to answer your question, I'm not saying that everyone is a superhero. What I'm saying is go at your capacity when you're in those spaces, especially on the bus. My capacity is actually to speak up because I see it. My capacity is to do. That's just me, and that's how I navigate the world. It doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing. Whatever your capacity is and whatever you feel safe in doing it, that's the way you navigate your world. If you feel as though the safest way that you can navigate being on a bus or being in a store is that you wait until, like you just said, an example, wait until the person leave and then affirm the person that was assaulted, and comfort them and encourage them, that if that's your capacity, that's your capacity. So what I'm saying is figure out within yourself, again, I'm not going to say this too many times, how you navigate yourself in the world around you is how you literally connect with the world. And so if you know yourself and you know how to navigate it, it becomes easier and easier because you start trusting your instincts. You start trusting who you are and how you are becoming, that you have that discernment in those moments to navigate.
One thing, when we're talking about harassment, and we deal with it to some degree where we all work, but how do you, and we have things we say to people when they're working alone. that we say to do, but is there something specific? Because when you're in a situation where you're by yourself, you can't, and even if you would have, let's say, called the police, you can't necessarily, it's not safe. So do you have ideas, besides what maybe we've talked about? I don't know.
Thank you for the question. That's really tricky because I think in this day and age, I'm going to say something controversial. It's almost irresponsible to have anybody in this city work alone in that way, especially in a place like Capitol Hill that could be a target, right? If there's a way to not have a person, and maybe it's contextual in terms of like not closing the store at night alone, like maybe have somebody come in for a couple hours, maybe during the day, it can be a little more mitigated because there's people coming in and out. But I think as time is going on and people are getting more and more desperate, especially on the right, and they're thinking they're fighting some kind of war in their head, but it's real to them. And if there's a way to avoid this kind of preventative, offense is the best defense. I think if there's a scenario where there can be, and maybe this is where you all as a community say, if stores are near each other geographically, you let people know, like, you know what, you couldn't get a second person to close whatever store, let the person next door to you, this is where we need to expand our imaginations for community care and safety. Because I'll tell you, people who want ill will and evil have an endless imagination for harm. Like, who thinks of caging children? So let's, for us, expand our imaginations for community care and what that looks like. So one idea is, having a network of folks. Maybe there's 3 people closing alone at nighttime. So check in with each other. Make sure you just send a text. I'm okay, or I need help. So that nobody's truly alone. So even if it's not practical, and I know finances and economics are a thing, that you can't practically hire 2 people to close. Let's say have a different way of folks connecting with each other, because being isolated is the worst. And it's how folks, especially female-identified folks, trans women especially, get murdered. It's being alone. It's not about what anybody wears or whatever, anything else. It's about being alone, right? So if there's a way you all as a community can check in with each other, can create networks, can create group chats, can say who's on, the Friday. I'm from the north, New York City, nothing closes. Where here things are closed at like 9. I'm like, how is this a thing? Anyway. So, it's 9 o'clock, so you're about to close, check in with, apologies for the Seattle teasing. I need to, but I can't help it. Thank you. It's it's cultural observations from different coasts. But, so I would say definitely have intentional conversations about how you all can support each other, because you're going to need that more and more as time goes on. The interesting thing about what I like about when I come to I now live in West Seattle. I used to live in Mount Baker, but what's interesting when I move around in the spaces in Capitol Hill is I love the signs, like we're affirming, we're welcoming, no bullying, no. There is something powerful about having that as part of the community. And when there was the uprising here, and I had family would text me, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Why wouldn't I be okay?" And they're like, "The riots in Seattle." I'm like, there's literally couches like, "Hey, you want to talk about race?" I'm like, "They're giving away pizza." I'm like, y'all have a whole, I don't know what you're seeing, like where you are, but I was hanging out listening to music, and taking pictures of, anyway. So I think it was pretty, the panic texts I got from folks on the East Coast were hilarious, because I didn't even know what they were talking about. Anyway, so I think already where you kind of are all, the strength that Capitol Hill has, in spite of gentrification, is maintaining some sense of a community that still affirms a target group, right? The LGBTQ community primarily. So it could be that you have, I don't know, like I said, I notice the signs and I find them comforting, and there could be, we're part of a community care network, and whatever it is, like however you all want to navigate that. But I do think having intentional conversations on what it looks like to support each other, especially when somebody's working alone, because it does make me nervous, and I feel like as time goes on, I don't, especially in areas that are known as being friendly to, there are 300 anti-trans legislations in the country right now. it's all connected. Here's the thing, I bring this up because why there's even folks empowered or want to be, it's not in a vacuum. So, people just don't wake up one day and be like, I'm having a great day, I'm a happy person, I'm not worried about anything, I'm going to go yell at somebody who's gay. That's not a thing that happens. It is conditioned, it's political. It's part of this diet of fear and scapegoating, and it's coming from somewhere. So, I think we on the left, and I think white liberals especially, have underestimated that danger. I don't think anymore. I think it's once Roe v. Wade happened, which black and brown women have been saying for centuries, our bodies have been policed, and now it happened to white women. It's like, oh shit, yeah, if you only listen. Anyway, so it's all connected is why I keep bringing this up. Nothing's in a vacuum. So does it land? I don't even know if this would be your job. Am I giving you more work to do? How you like that, here, create a network of community care. But it seems like it could be an intentional conversation to have about how, and you don't have to overthink it. Like literally could be a group chat on text, WhatsApp.
I work in the 12th Avenue Arts Building, and then we had an escalated incident last summer, which got me into the wormhole of mental health first aid. And Alexa Manila led a de-escalation workshop for us at Gen Pride. This is all in our current location. But the point of my sharing right now is that because of that escalated incident, I exchanged not even desk phone numbers, because there's the voicemail loop that you get stuck in, actual cell phone numbers on actual Post-it notes next to our phones so that we could direct message, direct call, and then I've been trying to reach out to each of the admins in the offices up and down the hall to have a regular lunch where we can actually talk and connect and know each other, not just to talk about the escalation, but about each other's lives. And that's just the informal part of it. But
Yes. Building community and not just in response to trauma is, and I will, again, it's all connected because I do workshops on race and identity. Privileged groups of people, dominant culture, have not needed to do that. Like U.S. society has been set up for the comfort of first white cisgender heterosexual men, then white cisgender heterosexual women, and then we can go down the hierarchy. However, so communities of color, black communities, indigenous communities, immigrant communities have had to for survival have this network immediately, right? So now it's a learning that to do it and be intentional. I mean, that's a great idea. Have a once a month lunch. Brown bag it. You don't have, or potluck it, whatever it is. So you all get to know each other as people and you're invested in each other as people.
I guess this will be. I hate to always say something, but
No.
Also is understanding as a community within your actual store or your actual establishment to have an exit plan for everyone. So at night,
Yes.
if you know that different people are there, at a coffee shop or wherever, there's always a customer there that just happened to be there because they like staying in your establishment, or they come at, it's like a habit. People are habitual, beings. So if you have someone that's already there and you know that they're there, so that helps your person that actually is there by themselves know that they're there, and then have a actual relationship with the person, saying, hey, I'm about to close. I'm not asking you to watch out, but just be abrupt of what's happening, because they're more than welcome to do it, because that's their place of their community space also. So it's about having relationships with the people that are patrons of your space, and not only that, having an exit plan. Say, hey, I know you're closing by yourself, or those times that again, everything is pattern, or everything is habitual, everything happens in the same, pattern. So if you know that opening up early in the morning is a little dangerous, literally have an opening strategy of opening up the store where that person feels safe, or at 12 o'clock, there's a rush and there's, people there that are still in that person cannot, do the register and, hold down the space. having in place at those times when you know you cannot hire someone else, different strategies that you know that might work, and then actually asking your people, hey, what will make you feel safe? Because I think most owners forget to actually add them in the conversation. They always think that they know what's best. And half the time, sure, it's your establishment, but they're running your establishment when you're not there. So they have eyes, and they have ears, and they have experience that you might not have because you're busy running the space. So allowing those individuals within those space to be a part of the conversations. So I think that's the last thing I'll say.
Oh, that's